Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining my presentation on category creation. We'll be talking about how to drive demand for a market that doesn't exist yet today. Emma already introduced me. I'm Ksenija. I'm leading the marketing department at Buynomics. Buynomics is a B2B SaaS company that's enabling revenue growth management functions and enterprise CPGs. That's a role, revenue growth management, that you might not have heard before. That's because the function as it exists nowadays is fairly young, which has provided us with a rare blue ocean for category creation, which we will be talking about today. I personally have over a decade of experience in marketing. Half of that time I have spent in B2B SaaS, and I had the luck to make it through 3 different category creators in that time. Pridatect, a company in the privacy ops space, Kuzuno, a contact for tendering subcontractors, and now Buynomics. And I will be talking a bit about category creation with you today. Let's get started. I brought to you a couple of quotes as an intro here. The first one is from Alan Kay, the godfather of the computer himself, and I would like to talk to you about why category creation is actually controversial, but still worth it. One of the first things that I hear a lot about category creation is that it's expensive and it takes too long. And as Alan Kay said, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. But that takes time, money, and relentless execution. I do absolutely agree that creating a new category requires significant investment in education, in branding, and evangelism before you're actually seeing ROI. And I would never attempt category creation for a bootstrap startup. So if that is what you are doing, I would suggest you to leave that, or with insufficient funds. It's important that you're VC-backed if you're attempting category creation. And if you're thinking about joining a company that is a category creator, that is also one of the questions that I would be asking in your interview process to make sure that the upfront investment is there. It's a long journey and it requires significant investment before seeing returns. Another very common controversial, a very common critic that I hear about category creation is that nobody cares about your category. And I brought you another quote here, this time from the queen of positioning herself, April Dunford. No one buys a category, people buy solutions to their problems. And yeah, that's true. Customers don't wake up thinking, I wish there was a new category of software out there. They care about solving their problems. They don't care about your industry buzzwords that you're throwing at them. And I would also doubt that from a marketing perspective or from a founder perspective, anyone would be creating a category for the sake of doing it. In my experience, it always comes from serving an underserved audience that has no existing solution at that moment for their problem. And that's why you're usually attempting to create a category. And lastly, I want to address that convincing buyers is hard. And I brought you a last quote, I promise, from Steve Jobs, Apple co-founder in this case. If you're first, you're going to spend a lot of time explaining what you do. If you're second, you just say, we're like them, but better. That's a luxury we definitely do not have in category creation. And we're going to talk about how to convince buyers today. Perfect. Let me jump into this. And let me get started by talking about the difference. Why is category creation and demand generation different from traditional demand capturing and maybe a type of marketing that is a bit more well known on the market? In demand capture, you do have an existing market. You have a problem that's known. You have buyers that are searching for a solution to that known problem. And you have competitors that are competing on the market with competing solutions. You are capturing demands based on that, based on buyer search behavior and based on existing competitors having created a market around that already. Meanwhile, in demand generation, you don't have the luxury that you can just go ahead and harvest existing demand. You have no existing market. You oftentimes have even an unrecognized problem there, or you have some problems, but they don't recognize that it goes deeper than they think. You need to start educating the market around that, around the unrecognized problem, and also around your new approach that you are positioning yourself with. And you need to create demand before you can actually go ahead and capture it. That is also why you don't have existing competitors oftentimes in the market. So in category creation, you're not fighting competitors, you're usually fighting inertia, and you fight a status quo that might be existing there and a willingness to change. Going into demand capture, as I just showed, it's targeting buyers who already know what they need and are actively searching for it. Let me show you why a couple of key methods that work in demand capture have no space in category creation. SEO and paid search, as you can imagine, with no known solutions, it will be super, super difficult to actually go the usual Google Ads route. You cannot just rank for high intent keywords like CRM software for SMBs to capture existing demand, because there is not a known category that people are actively searching for. Competitor conquesting might be also quite challenging if you don't have existing software competitors that you can just bid on. And review sites and marketplaces are also usually not knowing of your category. It hasn't been created with them yet. Maybe you can work with them down the line on it when your category is becoming more known. But in the beginning, all those spaces are great for demand capture, those methodologies, but not for demand generation. We do have a lot of key methods, though, that we can use for demand creation to educate, evangelize, and make people realize that they have a problem before selling them the solution. First, you have to start creating a strategic narrative and reframing the market. It can be helpful to align with a bigger shift that you see in the industry. Cloud computing was one, AI-driven decision-making is one that we are leaning into right now, and to use storytelling to reframe the expectations that people have around them. For example, spreadsheets are failing to solve your multidimensional RGM problems. AI is the future. Evangelism and thought leadership is another very important method there, to position your company around the solution that you're creating, the category that you're creating. You would oftentimes use your CEOs or founders for that and make sure that you're perceived as a category creator and not just like one vendor more out of plenty that the company is dealing with. Speaking at conferences, publishing your own research, owning the industry conversation, all of that will feed into that. Strategic content marketing is another core pillar that you would be working on if you're creating a category. Creating category defining content like white papers or reports or industry insights can be helpful there, and always making sure to highlight this urgent, unaddressed pain point that you are addressing with your category. Community building is another very, very strong method in category creation, which I will be addressing a bit further down. But yeah, working on creating a community of early adopters and engage them in conversations, use events, external, internal panels, collaborate with influencers, etc. Customer success stories and social proof of your early adopters, as well as, of course, long-term brand work, making sure that you're establishing this new way of thinking and educate the market over time. All of this are ways to create demand before you then can go ahead and capture it. And I would like to show you a couple of practical examples that have worked for me in the past in category creation today. Category creation almost always starts in a niche. That's maybe something that people are not so much aware about, but radical approaches are often too early for the mainstream, and you find your early adopters rather in underserved or very specialized niche segments. It's important to avoid to go too broad too early, because that's like a secure way to waste resources. And as we already talked about, category creation is expensive as it is. So it's really important to be clever about your approach. Let me give you an example for those niche and early adopter plays from my own experience. As I mentioned, I worked for Pridatect, a privacy operations SaaS, and our target in Pridatect were data protection officers. This was at a time where GDPR just came into play, so data protection officer was quite a new role. Suddenly, all companies needed to have a data protection officer, and we were providing a solution to digitize and optimize the work that they were doing. We found our early adopters in tech companies, because typically data protection officers from tech companies were more open to implement a software solution. In Kusuno, my next category play, it was a platform for construction tenders. We noticed that construction firms were mostly family-owned businesses, a very, very specific type of business. And if you have somebody that has been doing something 40 years for the same way, it's really tough to convince them to change something and to digitize. So what we noticed, what our early adopters were often, when a generational shift was happening, a transition of leadership, we could go for the next generation that was more open to drive change. And those were our early adopters in our very specific niche there. And now lastly, Buynomics, revenue growth management, where I'm right now, the RGM department in enterprise CPG companies. And there we noticed the EU and US market are way further advanced when it comes to developed RGM functions. And also from a certain size of company, we just find a better level of data quality for the type of AI that we are using. So we found our early adopters in this specific part of our niche, and that's where we're tackling. So it's important that you invest in product marketing first when you start category creation. You identify your ICP, you position as small and specific as possible, and then you create super relevant messaging and content around that. Don't try to be everything for everyone. That never works out. And use this early success that you establish with your early adopters in your niche to build out credibility and to expand further down the line. So addressing one of the key methods that I mentioned earlier, content creation, strategic content creation. It's super important to make your prospects realize that they have a problem before you start selling them a solution to their problem. And that's essentially the key strategy that we have in category creation. It's important that your content is pain point focused. So rather than making content like why Buynomics is the best RGM platform in our case, we are producing content like tackling rising costs to protect margins in 2025. Rising costs is a problem that our audience can resonate with. They understand it, they see it, they are interested in it. And the way that they are solving it at the moment by utilizing Excel sheets, which is very, very common in our industry, we are showcasing them in our content, why that is insufficient, why they need approach that is AI-based, because it can enable them to consider multi-dimensions, which Excel cannot. And by introducing that via content attached to their problem, we are making them aware why the problem goes deeper than they think. And we are introducing them to our new innovative approach of solving this problem. That is also leading me to the second point, establishing a new way of thinking. That is what you want to do with your content. So addressing the problems, establishing a new way of thinking, highlighting your innovative approach. It always helps to couple up with known industry brands and speakers. We like to use our own customers whenever we can. Being in an enterprise segment, that is quite thankful. Being able to bring customers like Danone or Unilever speakers on board, of course, helps always out, as you can imagine, for the brand, and also to build up trust and authority. Apart from that, of course, the quality of the content that you're bringing out, doing in-depth research. If you have own data, that is always helpful. Bringing out case studies with your customers, all of that helps you to build this trust and authority up. Community building is another very important growth lever that we're utilizing in Buynomics as well, but that is crucial to category creation. You can leverage your customers by creating exclusive customer days or invite-only roundtables. You can make use of exclusive networking opportunities that are external, like private networking dinners, or create discussion groups or invite-only events for senior leaders. And of course, owned events are always strong. Digital summits, like you are attending right now with me, the Demand Conf is a good example of that, or in-person forums that gather thought leaders. At Buynomics, we do all of that. We are regulars at external events in Europe and in the US. We are organizing with external providers networking dinners for our prospects. And as you can see here on the right-hand side, this year, we are also hosting our first in-person forum in London, bringing together an exclusive group of industry specialists, some of them our own customers, of course, which is always great to have brand ambassadors amongst your own customers, and then also engaging prospects. that way. This is something that Buynomics has done from day one, and that was really, really important in building up our thought leadership in that space. Another really important point to mention here is speaking opportunities on events, making use of those. We are lucky enough that one of our founders is a strong thought leader in that space. If you have that luxury, I would always make use of that. Otherwise, find yourself a strong thought leader in your company. It can be a VP of sales. It could be a VP of customer success. You just have to find somebody that is very knowledgeable in that space. It could be even your VP of product, really depends on how your company is set up, and make sure to send them to events, let them speak, let them explain your methodology, your way of thinking, your category creation. That will open doors for conversations down the line. And very, very important for talking about demand generation, forget the classic SaaS channel mix. That oftentimes does not work and is not represented in category creation. You can see here on the left-hand side an analysis of where our meetings, inbound meetings, are coming from based on a first touch and last touch analysis we ran. And as you might have noticed, we have a big part of our demand generation coming from paid social and organic social, which specifically is LinkedIn. We are using LinkedIn a lot as a channel. I know you heard about LinkedIn in the session before mine. That is due to demand generation being category creation being a very top-heavy game. No surprise here. As I mentioned, you have no existing intent that you can just tap into, so you need to create your demand. We're utilizing webinars, we're utilizing white papers and other content, downloadable content, and advertising it on LinkedIn. And we're very strong as well in engaging LinkedIn, an organic audience on LinkedIn. Then thought leadership content is a second important part for us. Blog posts, white papers that are found organically, as well as we're utilizing it via email marketing or via organic social. Events and community-led growth, as I mentioned previously, are an important part. You can see that oftentimes in the channels coming through offline sources or direct traffic. And then also we are re-engaging contacts via lifecycle marketing. That's why it's so important in category creation for sure, where you have, even if you are not playing enterprise, you typically will find longer sales cycle. You're longer in touch with prospects before you're converting them. So it's so important that you're not only looking at a first touch or last touch attribution. Make sure that you're also looking alongside the funnel and that you're understanding how your prospects are moving. In this case, you can see obviously email marketing, lifecycle marketing is really important for us to re-engage contacts, and it's an important last touch channel that we're having. Partnerships, we are utilizing partners to publish industry studies, reports, interviews with them. And then also over time, we're layering in additional media channels, YouTube, podcasts, PR. This is the case for Buynomics, but I can promise you, since this is the third time I'm doing category creation, I have seen a very, very similar channel mix in the last two SaaS companies that I have worked in. And it's probably not unusual that if you are niche, you're going for LinkedIn. How do you make sure to grow efficiently with LinkedIn ads? One thing that I oftentimes hear when I talk to other marketers about LinkedIn is that LinkedIn is incredibly expensive. If you're comparing it to Facebook, Instagram ads, you see way higher cost per clicks. And you have to have a certain invest upfront to start playing on LinkedIn. How do you do that without mindlessly burning resources and grow also efficiently on it? Pipeline generation in a niche is different. You won't be able to grow new leads alone. And I think that is a very important thing to first understand. And secondly, communicate also early on when talking with senior stakeholders about what you're planning to do. As you can see here on the left-hand side, we are growing both at the moment still, new lead generation as well as lead re-engagement. That means those are leads that we have already in our CRM system, but that we're re-engaging via LinkedIn campaigns. But at some point, we know that in already established market, like in our case, for example, Europe, we've been for a long time on the European market, new lead generation will sufficiently slow down. And if we're not entering new markets or new verticals, that one will be limited. But re-engagement is really important for us, because somebody who knew us from 2 years ago and has been consistently in touch with us might might purchase further down the line. And we see also that re-engagement conversion rates are a lot higher. Hyper focus on the right audience to enable budget efficiency, feed LinkedIn with your CRM data. That is really, really strong play, utilizing as much data as you have to make your LinkedIn targeting as efficient as possible. That also aligns your work super strongly with what your sales team is doing and enables you to have a combined approach. Scale with paid while building out organic channels and consistently experiment with them. And then capture leads top of the funnel, nurture and engage them, as I just mentioned, so that you have warm leads that you're passing on to the BDs in the right moment. Which also leads me to my next point. It's super important to work hand in hand with BDs to get meetings booked and to move basically the pipeline down closer and closer to revenue, which we always want to do when we're doing marketing, being as close to revenue as possible. As you can see here on the left-hand side, our leads go through a strict qualification process so that we fit target accounts and buyer personas. And then nurturing is helping us to enrich the data by asking incrementally for more. Means when we are capturing leads on LinkedIn, oftentimes if you have done LinkedIn marketing before and if you've worked with LinkedIn forms before, you know that LinkedIn forms provide you with limited and maybe not the best quality of data in the market. That happened to us as well. We are capturing leads through LinkedIn forms. We just get Gmails. We don't ask for phone numbers at that stage, and BDs won't be too happy about leads like that. So what we're doing then in the next stage is when we're re-engaging them and we're nurturing them, we make sure that the forms on our own website are asking for a business email address and for a phone number. And this way we are enriching data by asking incrementally for more. Apart from utilizing data enrichment tools, that's a whole different topic. But yeah, the most qualified way is always asking the lead directly. Lead scoring ensures that leads which we are passing to our BDs are sufficiently aware of our solution. And lead scoring is a whole monstrum of itself, but it's good to look into. And constantly re-engaging marketing contacts ensures that we catch them at the point of interest or problem awareness for our BDs to call into. We have very few hand raisers in category creation, and that's something I'm being so often asked about by founders, by sales teams in the past, by partners. There's a difference in the leads that you are providing in category creation and demo requests. People want demo requests, people want hand raisers, and I completely understand that. But in category creation, you will find very, very, very few of them, and definitely not enough to grow. So it's important to understand that the game is catching problem awareness instead of catching solution awareness. Then, and that's my last slide before we can go into the Q&A, I would like to also talk to you about how to set the right targets for demand generation and how to measure what matters to grow your category. On the left-hand side, you can actually see our department objectives and key results for pipeline generation. We do also have a couple for brand awareness and thought leadership. For pipeline generation, we want to make sure to be as close to revenue as possible. So we measure inbound meetings booked. That's our target KPI that as a department we go after, our North Star. And to get inbound meetings booked, we need to engage a certain number of contacts. We know that because we know more or less our conversion rate throughout the funnel. So it's really important that you analyze your funnel, that you understand how you can measure pipeline impact and be close enough to revenue to understand that impact, but far enough to still be operational. In our case, both those metrics we can use in a quarter as targets to be still operational. And then for existing pipeline engagement, we're measuring the percentage of contacts that we can engage that are associated to open deals so that we can also support the sales department there. And we also measure the helpfulness of our sales enablement material that our product marketing department creates to understand how we are impacting the pipeline there. Standard SaaS metrics might often not fit your business. In our case, category creation, marketing in the niche, and enterprise marketing are all super special beasts. And it's important that our key results that we work with are working for that go-to-market strategy. And understanding your target audience and how to set efficient targets is super important. Classic MQL and SQL might just oftentimes not cut it. Don't try to fit yourself in there if it's not working out for you. Just try to work super closely with the sales team, analyze the funnel, and make sure that you're fitting into that. That was my presentation for today. And maybe before jumping into the Q&A, and I know Emma is already coming back, I would just like to very quickly mention we are growing at Buynomics. We have just very recently closed our Series B. Super happy about that. And the marketing department is also growing. So we're opening 2 new roles. Now, next week, I think they will be published on LinkedIn, but I wanted to share with you today in case you or anyone you know would be interested. We are looking for a product marketing specialist to add to our team and a content producer. So in case you know of anyone, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Thanks, Ksenija, for sharing this. Someone might get a job after the conference, so that's really good. Thank you for breaking down the entire process. It does sound complicated a little bit, but I'm sure that if you put just the right amount of effort, it can be done. I have some questions. I see the audience hasn't asked any questions right now, but they still have around 3-4 minutes. I have a question for you. How do you figure out if the problem you're solving really needs a new category and not just a better product feature?
It's a fair question to ask. There's different ways to approach that, right? Why do you need to create a new category is the question, right? When would you know that the pain point is big enough to actually start creating a new category and not just position yourself against something that's already existing? You need to find out, is the problem fundamentally underserved by the market right now, or is it just a minor inconvenience that people are facing? So you can do that by understanding what is your prospect, your audience, utilizing right now to solve this problem. Do they have workarounds like spreadsheets or some hacks that they use? That's a sign that the market has not solved the problem yet. You do not have any established competitors in the landscape. So there you have a space to create a new category. And also another way that you can look at is if the problem does require creating a new line of budget or a new stakeholder in the company that manages it, or a whole major shift in thinking. That is also likely a sign that it's a good way to start a new category. In our case, for example, I can tell you at Buynomics, we are tapping into a budget that is not meant for software. It's meant for consultants, actually. That is the workaround that companies are solving out at the moment. And that is how we know it's a category creation.
And how do you define competitors? You mentioned competitors. How do you define competitors when creating a new category?
Yeah, I'm liking to think in 2 different terms. Competitors oftentimes being somebody very, very similar to you, so like another software company that is doing something similar that you are doing, and competitive alternatives, which is what customers perceive as a competitor to your solution. In our case, as I mentioned, we do have consultancies, which actually in the future, in our category creation, we don't perceive as competitors. We think in the future they will be our partners, and that was also a really, really great way to grow. At the moment, we are competing oftentimes for budget, though, and that's the honest answer, right? Who's going for the same budget that we are going for? Those are our competitors. And another competitive alternative that you're oftentimes facing in category creation is good old Excel. Excel is being used to solve all kinds of problems.
Of course, yeah.
How can you do it better than Excel? That would be also a very usual competitive alternative.
Okay, and we still have a minute and a half. So we have a question. Creating demand in a new niche seems really highly reliant to LinkedIn. Have you tried other channels of interacting with the ICP, and how did it work?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Absolutely. It's highly reliant on LinkedIn, and it has always been in all 3 cases that I have worked in category creation. And yes, we have tried a lot of other channels.
Yeah, I could see in your presentation, yeah.
Yes, none that has been as successful as LinkedIn. As I mentioned, creating your own channels, like creating your own formats. I mean, Emma here is a great example of that herself with Demand Conf. Skale has done a great job there, so I can definitely recommend that. Events, as I mentioned, community building is a really, really good channel, even though it's not a classic traditional demand generation channel, digitally speaking. And another one that we are actually very interested right now and that we see growing is YouTube. So that's something that we want to tap our feet a bit more into. But yeah, that's that. LinkedIn is definitely front runner there.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for answering. We don't have any more time because we need to present our next guest, our next speaker. I wish you all the best, and thank you for being our speaker again this year.
Thank you for having me, Emma. Good luck. Bye.
Bye.